Ben, do you believe this is more because RCR needs the equipment to be better contending for wins? Or is Kyle Busch not exactly the driver he used to be competitively?
I don't think it's that. I think, Kyle Busch is 39 years old. I think, statistically speaking, a lot of drivers actually just hit their prime, which is kind of crazy to think about Kyle Busch and all the success that he's had, 60 plus cup wins and obviously a couple of championships of his own. But I think Kyle's got just as much competitive fire as ever. And I think he's just as good a driver as ever. I really don't think, you're seeing it now with Denny Hamlin, even well into his early to mid 40s. Kevin Harvick, another great example of drivers staying competitive into their early 40s. I don't think this is like, we've historically seen in Formula One, you get into your late 30s, early 40s, that's considered ancient. That's probably like, Mark Martin, racing into his 50s here in NASCAR Cup. That's what we see over in Formula One. Here in NASCAR, though, it's easy to stay competitive, I think, in your late 30s and early 40s, for the drivers that have all the experience and are at the top of their game here, multiple time champions in the case of Kyle Busch. I think he still has what it takes to be competitive. It's RCR that I question here. Can they give him the equipment necessary to do so? And you saw it this year with Austin Dillon as well. And I don't think Austin Dillon's nearly as great of a Cup Series driver as Kyle Busch is. And I know he did get that win at Richmond under very controversial circumstances, and which again is another tragedy of modern day NASCAR and all the gimmicks and everything with overtime. He was well on his way to winning that race, regardless. So give credit where it's due there. And Kyle Busch, maybe could have had a couple here or there. Things gone slightly differently. He came this close at Atlanta, finished third. I think a lot of people forget just how close he was to winning a race just in the second race of the season. So who knows how that might have sparked a different kind of season run for him if he had had just another hundredth of a second to his advantage there. But I think when you look at any format you have here, pulling up again the Latford System Winston Cup account, Kyle Busch would have been 17th this year. In non-playoff standings, I think he would have been 17th under the current point system. And then under the actual system where he ranks in the final official points, he's 20th, which is, I think, again, is because a lot of drivers, leapfrogged him from getting into the playoffs. And you had drivers ahead of him like Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, and Chris Buescher that, might have been in the top 16 points-wise, but obviously didn't win a race in the first 26 races, so they didn't get into the playoffs to begin with. So regardless of how you slice it, not the season that Kyle Busch would have wanted, to say the least, but I think that's more a reflection on RCR and how much work they have to do to get back to the level that they want to be at, rather than an indictment on Kyle Busch's talent or saying that he's washed or he needs to retire or whatever. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I expect Kyle Busch to take this offseason, be more fired up than ever. And I would not bet against him winning multiple races next year if RCR can do their part to give him the car that he needs to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ben there. I think it's RCR. It's not Kyle Busch here at all. I mean, when you put one of arguably the greatest driver in the history of your sport, similar to Formula One with Sir Lewis Hamilton, remember, some of the best equipment, but he was winning all the time. And then all of a sudden, like Kyle Busch's streak came to an end, Lewis Hamilton's came to an end too. And it just shows that, yes, being one of the most talented drivers ever is definitely a positive. But if you don't have the right equipment under you, you are not going anywhere. And we saw that with Kyle Busch. I mean, he would have been 17th in the regular season, like full season standings. In fact, he would have made, if this was just the top 16, I remember writing about this for gridnetworktv.com. If this was just the top 16, no winning in with like Harrison Burton and stuff like that. And if Joey, even then, he would have made it over Joey Logano in the playoffs because Kyle Busch would have been, I believe, the 15 or 16 seed, and Logano would have been one spot out. And that's just crazy to me. It really is. But no, besides that, I think Kyle Busch had a lot of false hope last year. I think Richard Childress Racing was great. I think it was just him trying to prove a point that he can win without Joe Gibbs Racing or Hendrick Motorsports way back when. And he did just that. And then he fell off the face of the earth with that equipment. I mean, shout out Austin Dillon in a full season would have been like 27th. But this year, Austin Dillon was 32nd in points. 32nd in points. I know there was a penalty. But if you have that much of a gap between two drivers, even equipment, I still think Austin Dillon is not a bad driver. I really do not. but 32nd in Richard Childress Racing equipment is laughable. It really is. And I feel terrible for them because they really are in a historic organization. But if you have a car that poor, something has to change. And I think Kyle Busch, if he knew ahead of time, I know it's a lot of financial. This is a business. I think if he had sponsorship, he would have really never left Joe Gibbs Racing, or maybe Denny Hamlin would have gotten him to 2311. I don't think he would have gone really to Richard Childress Racing if he had the funding that would have helped him stay with Toyota. But now, I mean, we all joked, like, is he going to try to get out of his contract? I don't know what he's going to do, but something's got to change. But then hopefully he wins the Daytona 500 so we can stop talking about this winless streak and that 21 years of trying, or however long it's been for Kyle Busch. It would be 20 or 21 now because 19-year streak comes to an end. But, man, it's just disappointing to see. I don't think it's the downfall of arguably the greatest driver in the history of the sport. I really don't. I just think it was a very bad hand dealt to him this season with that team. I mean, they had that run where, I mean, I remember with Ty Gibbs making that joke, like they got fast all of a sudden. After, I mean, Austin Dillon win, and then Kyle Busch had like 3 straight top 4s. It was looking promising. And then again, I don't think his name was mentioned once on the broadcast today. I really don't. So that goes to show what happened to Richard Childress, what happened to Kyle Busch this year. And it's just very unfortunate from a fan, even as a reporter perspective. That just, to watch the streak end like that in that abysmal type of way, like it wasn't even close to happening.
Yeah, well, Matthew, Austin Dillon was also 29th in points last year. So I think, obviously Kyle Busch won 3 races his first season with RCR, but Dillon particularly, it's been a terrible two-year run for him here. But I didn't even realize that, to be quite honest with you. Kyle Busch would have been straight up points, no winning you're in after race 26. He would have been ahead of Joey Logano in the standings with.
I believe he was like right at 16th or 15th. I mean, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember writing about that, sitting to myself like, wow, very
that was how Logano's season was trending before the. That's your current dynasty right now, guys. Worse than RCR after 26 races, and then they get hot at the right time. But hey, that's more power to them. That's the world that we're living in right now.